Should start just a moment. All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody on the internet. This is the January 2022 Houston Java User Group meeting. My name is Jim Bethencourt. I'm the president of the Houston Java User Group, and I'm really glad you're with us. And tonight we have Andres Almiray, who is works at Oracle, but he's worked here tonight to talk to us about his own project that he's spent his own spare time making. It's really neat. It's called JReleaser, and it makes releasing binaries so much easier. Because I don't know about you, but I've taken and worked on Refactor first, and it took me quite a while to actually figure out how to get the release straightened out. So I actually need to switch over to JReleaser and make my life a bit easier myself. But Andres is going to tell us about the origins of JReleaser and how to use it, and all sorts of other great stuff. So Andres, without further ado, please take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you everyone else for joining tonight. I'm streaming live directly from Switzerland, where, given the time difference, is a little bit after 2 in the morning for me. But that's okay. That's one of the things that I like, is to share knowledge and to share content with people that are interested in learning new things, new ideas. And as Jim mentioned, today we're going to talk about open source project, a tool that I kind of like landed on my lap that this kind of tool was missing, and no one else was writing such a tool and say, well, I can do it, perhaps. And well, here's the result. So I'm going to share the slides, and for those that joined just recently, feel free to ask questions at any time. Don't wait until the end of the meeting. And
one thing I should also one thing I should also mention that this recording and meeting is made possible through my employer, Improving. It's a great consulting company. I really enjoy working here, and if you're interested, let me know, and I'd be happy to help you get situated with an interview.
Yep. All right. So here we go. Let me play the slides, and
awesome.
Let's ask questions anytime. Okay. So as previously mentioned, my name is Andres Almiray. I'm currently employed by Oracle, where I talk about a lot of things about the database because I work with the database group, and I'm a Java champion alumni. And I love Java, I love open source, I love to talk about so many different things. But tonight, I would like to talk about an open source project on my own that is completely unrelated to my employer. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how the tool came to be, so that we understand what the tool can do or may do for you. And then we dive deep into a couple of demos, and then figure out what else the tool can do. So like yourselves, I write code for a living. And specifically in my case, I like to write open source code. Whether those are command line tools or desktop applications, it depends on what's the current task at hand. Most of the desktop applications that I write are JavaFX based. So I had an application that I wrote like 2 or 3 years ago, where you display a series of icons that you can apply to different JavaFX applications. It's just an icon browser for different icons. So once I build this thing, which is, well, really straightforward, and you package that into, I don't know, into a jar, you want, or in my case, I wanted users to be able to find that application and to install it and use it and just be merry with it, right? So as a developer, it sounds very easy when we say, oh, I'm done packaging my project, I'm done coding, so it's ready for a release, it's ready for production, and create the jar and then put it on a web page, and eventually the users will find it, right? Well, not really. In reality, users will prefer to install your application, and they will prefer to use a specific platform package managers or a platform installer instead of downloading a jar file or a zip file from who knows where. And they would like to have some sort of documentation or release notes or a change log. and some other bits and pieces. Of course, we can do this. So there are platform packages such as Homebrew or Snapcraft. You might have heard of the SDK-man. And many of these platform packages require additional inputs or files that can be generated that follow certain guidelines, so that in the end you get an additional set of files or an additional set of binaries, the installers, whatever it is, right? And for each one of these options, you will have to learn about the formats, about the syntax, about the different things, switch and levers that you can turn on and off in order to get to the final product. So of course, that's going to take some time for each one of those platform packages. So that was me a couple of years ago, when I wanted to deliver my application to as many possible users that are out there. And I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't know how many different platform packages I could use. So where should I put all these things? So I put that project in a pause for a moment and decided to look at other things. So I got as an inspiration 2 other projects. So besides writing Java code, I also write Go code. And I started a CLI application called GUM that lets you run Maven or Gradle via its wrappers launcher or the actual Maven or Gradle command. And I wrote this in Go. And I faced the same issue, which is once you have the Go binary, which is compiled specifically for a platform, I would like that particular binary to be consumed by a user, because it's silly, in my point of view, that if I tell you, here's I have an application, I'll go to this Git repository, configure the tool chain, clone it, build the binary yourself, and now you can use it. Well, not really. It's much better if I say, hey, go to that particular platform packager that is very popular. My binary is there. Just use it. Oh, do you want to use a different platform packager? Then here you go. And there is a project called JReleaser that does this for Go applications. So you simply say, here's a source code, and give it a model that is written in YAML. And JReleaser will calculate checksums and sign with PGP signatures, and create a Git release for you with change to look at so many other things, right? So when I saw this, I said, wow, this is amazing. I want this for Java applications. But there was nothing of the sort for Java. Well, at the same time, there is this other project called JBank, which is the best Java command line tool besides JReleaser, of course, that you can use. So JBank, think of it as like the Java interpreter or JShell on steroids. So you can launch single Java source files as if they were Java scripts, plus with dependencies and a few other things. So this tool is amazing. And the author, Max Anderson, he had the same idea as myself when I created this JavaFX application. He wanted users to be able to install JBank in many different ways. So he did it in the old-fashioned way. He looked at the different platform packagers and updated his build. He had to build with Gradle and added a few other scripts in order to be able to publish JBank to many different platform packagers and many different things. So one day he and I were talking about all the things that he had to do by hand in order to publish a new version of JBank. And I said to him, well, I did the same for my Go application, but I didn't have to spend so much time finding out all these things that you did, because JReleaser does that for me. And then there's a sudden moment of realization where we both say, well, what if there was a project for the Java ecosystem that will do things like JReleaser, but for Java? Perhaps this tool could learn from the lessons that that Max encountered with JBank, so that other Java projects could have a much faster undertaking into releasing their binaries. And that's exactly how JReleaser came to be. So what it is, basically, you keep using your build tools, the ones that you already know and love. So maybe it's Apache Ant, or it's Apache Maven, or it's Gradle, or it's something else. Whatever it is, you keep using it. You build the binaries in that way. It's a jar file, or it's a zip file that contains a distribution, and you supply those inputs to JReleaser, the tool, plus an additional metadata file or some other kind of metadata description that will tell JReleaser where a release should go. You can post releases to GitHub, or GitLab, or Gitya, and this also includes the enterprise editions of say tools. So this works for both open source and for commercial and closed source. So it's as long as it's binary bits, JReleaser will do what you expect. You can package the binaries for platform packages such as Homebrew and Snapcraft, Chocolati, Scoop, and a few others. And also you can announce when a release is ready. So you can post a tweet or send a message to a Slack or post it to SDK Mag, send an email. There are many different distribution channels that you can choose from. So how does it do it? In the case of JReleaser, you define one YAML file and you have one command called JReleaser, and this does everything for you in one go. So creates checksums and does the signatures, create artifacts, creates the package managers, and now so you have everything in just one block. Whereas JReleaser, we do have that option to have everything in one block, but we also separate very early on. We found out that it would be better if, besides doing everything in one go, if we were to split every step independently from one another, so that if you wanted, you could just invoke one piece of it without having to use everything else. So that makes JReleaser very flexible. So if you want to run everything, which is create a Git release and create a package managers and announce the release, then you will likely use the orange command, which is full release. This does everything for you. If you only care about a Git release, then you use the blue column, which in this case separates in different steps, such as, and we start from the bottom one. It can calculate a changelog based on all your Git commits. It can calculate a checksum for each one of the input files that you would like to release. Optionally, if you configure signatures for PGP, then you can also generate digital signatures for all these artifacts. You can also upload to JFrog Artifactory or Amazon S3 or any other HTTP or HTTPS server under your control. And finally, obviously, create a Git release on GitHub, GitLab, Gitya, and upload all those binaries and checksums and signatures as release assets alongside the changelog. You can also, if you only care about the package managers, then you have the other column in the middle where you can prepare the basic files that a packager requires. In the case of Homebrew, there's a formula. You can create a Docker image, so you definitely need a Docker file. And the package step is where the actual packager is created. In the case of Docker, that's the Docker instance. And finally, the publish space or step is where those packages get uploaded or published to their corresponding service. So in the case of Homebrew, that's a Git repository. In the case of Docker, that will be a Docker registry, such as Docker Hub. And then you can also enhance a project to many different places. We do have another column, which is the one at the bottom left, the assemble column. JReleaser assumes that the binaries will be assembled or created by your build tool of choice. But if you want to, JReleaser can assemble some of those binaries, such as creating custom Java runtimes with JLink, even cross-platform Java runtimes. And you can also create native images with a GraalVM native image and native installers or native packages using JDK's JPackage tool. All right, so I already mentioned a few of the services that JReleaser integrates with, but here's the full list of everything. So we start with the places where you can post binaries. So those again are the Git services, GitHub, GitLab, Gitya. Codeberg is based on Gitya, is a service that is currently running here in Europe, but I mean, I think it's growing steadily. And if you want something that takes care of privacy, then that would be an option. and of course, any other Git service out there, such as Azure DevOps or Bitbucket or Amazon. What's it called? Code something. But some of the features that are related to releases are not really available when you use the generic Git service. Excuse me. Additionally to uploading artifacts to a Git release, you can upload those binaries to a few places, and JFrog Artifactory is quite popular. And that integration also works for Sonatype Nexus or HTTP or an HTTPS server, or you can put it into an Amazon S3 bucket or any other cloud provider that has an Amazon S3 compatibility API. In terms of platform packagers, Homebrew, I mentioned it already a couple of times, which works for Mac or Linux. Chocolate is for Windows. It uses the NuGet format. You can also create Docker images. GoFish works for Linux, Mac, and Windows. JBank also has its own way of launching jar files, so it's called like a JBank catalog. It's another way for you to deploy single jar files if you want to. MacBooks works on Mac. The Scoop is like Homebrew, but for Windows. SDKman works on all the three major platforms. It's my preferred way to install many different Java CLI tools. And Snapcraft is for Linux. Some people claim it works for Mac, but I haven't been able to make it work, and at least on my local machine. And Spec is for building RPMs using build services such as Fedora Copa.
I noticed that Microsoft came out with one recently called WinGet. I think that's pretty new.
Yeah, WinGet was announced sometime in 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I just saw it the first time today. I'm like, what? But
yeah, and yeah, I can say it right now. So WinGet is one of those other package managers that we have under our radar.
Okay,
but we don't provide yet integration for it.
Yeah.
And in terms of announcements, well, I already mentioned Twitter, but you can also send an email if you want to make things private, or we can use Teams as well, or go into a Discord server, or go Mastodon, or Zulip, which is kind of like a forum, or Telegrams, so many different things that you can use. If your distribution channel of choice is not listed here, and if it accepts incoming webhooks, then you can use a generic webhooks integration. If that doesn't work and you need some other kind of integration, well, it will be easier. Just talk to us, go into the Git project and raise an issue stating which service would you like to see integration with. So the inputs, these are the things that you provide to the tool. These are the binaries that you build. Let's start with a basic one, which are binary distributions. These are zip files or tar files that contain the jars of your application and a launcher script. The way that these zip files and tar files are created are they are plugins for Maven and Gradle that know exactly what to do. You just configure it and boom, you're done. JReleaser has an option for assembling zip files, but it doesn't provide the option for the launcher yet. So that's something that you'll have to figure out in your own way. Or you may want to deploy an application as an Uber jar. It's a fat jar that contains all the dependencies and the executable. There are also JLink distributions. These are, again, it could be zips or it could be tars that contain your production code, your application, but also bundle Java runtime. The idea with JLink is that you generate the smallest possible Java runtime that you can bundle with your application. So instead of the slash being a JDK or a JRE that is like 200 megabytes, you may be looking at, I think the smallest possible bundle that you can have is close to 24 megabytes plus your production code. We also support GraalVM native images distributions because obviously JReleaser can assemble those things. And finally, the native packages. These are the installers such as an MSI or an XE for Windows, RPN or Dev for Linux, and DMG or package for Mac. This you can create by hand. You can use Maven, Gradle, or JPackage to do all these kind of distributions. So how do you launch it? I'm going to showcase some of the options for launching the tool as a CLI. So if you're on a Mac like myself, you have a bunch of options. So SDK-man is my preferred way. So just do SDK-man and install JReleaser. Boom, you're done. You're in business. Or you can use JBank to launch it. Or use the Garfish install it. Or use Brew using a tab. So this is not coming from the core place where all other Homebrew formulas or casks are located. Port is for Mac ports, and if any of these options are not good enough for you, for whatever reason, you can go into the release page for a particular version and download either of these two options. So the JReleaser version, that is just the production code, the production binaries that you can just launch like any other Java command line tool, but you need a Java release, Java runtime in your computer. Now, don't worry, JReleaser runs since with JDK 8. Most people have Java 8 lying around, and you're good to go. Or if you use the standalone version, that is a production zip file that contains bundled Java runtime. So you don't need a Java version lying around somewhere in your computer. Just unzip this, and you can start using it immediately. For Linux, we have similar options. So again, SDK-man, JBank, GoFish, Brew, because it works on Linux, or you can install it using DNF if you are on Fedora or Fedora-compatible Linux distributions. You can also download it directly from the release page. We have another option, which is Linux Muscle. These are distributions of Linux that are compiled using Muscle instead of JLibC. And the most common option for Linux Muscle is Linux Alpine. And finally, for Windows, SDK-man, JBank, GoFish, the same idea as a Scoop, or again, you can download the zip files. Now, there are a few other options in case of Linux. I think there's also AppImage and Flatpak, which are not yet fully integrated as the other installers in JReleaser, but there's something that those additional packages that we maintain. Now, if any of these options were not to your liking for whatever reason, you can also run the tool as a Docker image, for which there are two different flavors. The JReleaser Slim, which is based on Ubuntu, or the JReleaser Alpine, which is based on Linux Alpine. And based on all these different options for you to run the tool, and given that JReleaser is a CLI tool and is based on Java, you may be wondering, does JReleaser release itself? Well, the answer is yes, it does, since the first release. All these different options of how you can consume the CLI are enabled by JReleaser itself using one single configuration file, which is something that I'm going to look in just a moment. You can also download JReleaser, or at least the uberjar executable, using this very simple Java script, getreleaser.java, which you can run in this way using Java 11, because it's pretty much the way that you can launch a Java source file without having to explicitly compile it. This is a feature that came about in Java 11, if I'm not mistaken, is JET 330. And once you have the jar, it's like you're running the CLI, just passing the different command arguments, and then you're in the same place as before. Those are only the options for running JReleaser, running the tool as a CLI. But if you want to, you can also run it as a Maven plugin, or as a Gradle plugin, or as a series of AND tasks. So we covered a wide spectrum of how you can integrate the tool with your release process or your release pipeline. Speaking of pipelines, you can run the tool locally in your environment, or you can run it in different CI/CD solutions, for which we have guides for 14 different options, but basically you can run it anywhere. These are just the places where you say, oh, this is very simple to configure, go and do this. And we do have a release action for GitHub Actions that makes it much, much simpler to use on GitHub. In the case of GitLab CI, if you have used it before, CI for GitLab is based on Docker images. And the Docker image that we produce, the ones that I showed you before, Slim or Alpine, are aware of the specifics for running inside GitLab CI. So there's no need to create yet another Docker image that bundles JReleaser with your project so you can use it within GitLab CI. Just use the standard GitLab, standard JReleaser Docker image, and you should be good to go. Okay, so that's enough of the theory. I hope that I gave you a few pointers of what can be done. Let me show you how we can do things. So I'm going to switch to a project here, which is hosted on GitHub. It's public, so anyone can see it. Apparently, I already have a release. And we can do something like this. We're going to delete this release because why not? And I'm going to delete that tag as well because, yeah, goodbye. Here we go. So here's my project. It's a Maven application. It's a very simple CLI application. It's very friendly because the only thing that it does is when you run it, it says, hi, hello, hello world. Right. And it does have a JReleaser model file here. And I'm not going to use it to begin with. The next thing we see, if we look at all the commits, there's a handful of commits, and each one of them follows a particular prefix. So it's a convention specific for this project. This is not related directly to JReleaser, but it will follow certain conventions. Then JReleaser can do more stuff with the metadata that you provide. Okay. So that's the code. It's public. You can go to that URL and you can see everything. If I clone this project here, and there are the sources. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create those binaries that I want to release. So I simply say Maven, build this project. And by the way, that command line that I invoke, you notice that it wasn't Maven. It's not even an alias. This is the Go application that I was telling you earlier before, which can detect if you have the Maven wrapper and run it, or use Maven directly. And also has a new feature like Maven doesn't have a build command. It doesn't have a build lifecycle. It has verify or some other things. But Gradle does have build. So I keep switching between Maven and Gradle, and I always got confused whether I should go with install or build or verify. So GUM is smart and has a series of mappings so that if I say build, it doesn't matter if it's Maven or Gradle, it will do the right thing for me. So that's another reason why I wrote this tool. Perfect.
Does it work with the Maven daemon as well?
Yes, it does. The latest version of GUM, versions 0.12.0 released just 2 weeks ago, adds support for Maven D.
Nice, nice.
So you can see of all the things that Maven did, it created a jar file and it created a series of binaries. Here's a tar.gc file and a zip file. So these are the things that I want to release. And I use the Maven assembly plugin and the app assembler plugin. So this one creates the executable and the launcher script, and assembly is the one that creates the zip file and the tar file, right? So just regular Maven configuration. Nothing really so difficult to do, just copy and paste. The next thing I'm going to do is check for JReleaser. I said my preferred way to check for JReleaser or install JReleaser is to SDK-man. So I can ask SDK-man to list all the versions of JReleaser. There are 12 versions. And I'm currently working on the 1.0.0 snapshot to be released soon. Latest release is 1.0.0 milestone 1. That was released last weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're almost there onto the golden 1.0. So that's the version that I currently have fixed. And we can check that it's actually true by asking JReleaser for its version. Great. And I can also ask JReleaser for, let's see what we can do with it. Well, we have this documentation, perfect. Notice that each one of these commands will map to the workflow that we saw earlier. So remember that we can do release or full release, upload, all those things. Here we are. If you would like to have auto-completion scripts, then you can invoke the generate auto-completion and add it to your shell. And you can also generate a JSON schema for the external configuration file, for which we have different formats. You can use YAML, or you can use TOML, you can use JSON. And of course, if you use the Maven or the Gradle plugin, you will use a specific DSL for that build. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to ask JReleaser to release my project. I'm going to do it live. And I'm going to say I want to auto-configure my project based on the Git metadata that I already have here. So check out my project. It has a remote. It has an URL. I have a username. So JReleaser should be able to grab that information for me.
So will it work with like secrets and keys and stuff like that that are part of the repository as well?
No.
No, okay.
No, it can't read your secrets. You have to tell that information. That's a good catch, because if I'm going to release to GitHub, I need credentials. I need the username or the password or a token.
Yeah.
Now that token can be passed as a parameter. If I want to, I can say, I think it's password, but for obvious reasons, I'm not going to type it. Or I can set it as an environmental variable, which by default, it will be JReleaser GitHub token.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, like the tokens. Yeah, I know I have to specify tokens whenever I run the GitHub action, whenever I generate a release and send it to Maven Central, basically. Yes. So yeah, that was what my question was.
Yeah, so it can be done that way.
Okay, nice.
Or there is another file out there where we can set it. So by default, JReleaser will look into this location, JReleaser config, and the format for this file could be a properties file with key value pairs, or it could be YAML with key values, or TOML, or JSON. It's up to you. So I actually chose TOML, and that file exists, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to show it, but that's where my token of the secrets lie.
Okay, right. Got it.
So the other thing that I want to do is, because I'm running this with the CLI, and there's no notion of the CLI relationship with Maven, I need to tell it which version I want to release. And if you recall, that was version 1.0.0. Okay, so I do enter, and notice what happens. I get some output here, some logins, and yeah, that's a particular version of JReleaser I'm using. I'm auto-configuring with these values. I'm loading the secrets from that TOML file. And let's see, it's not a snapshot, so that's good. This is the current timestamp, that is the current head, and that's the platform that I'm running on. It's a Mac. It's not dry run, so this is for reals. It generates the changelog, calculates the checksums. Oh, there are no checksums because there are no input files. There's no signing because, again, no input files, no uploading, no input files, and creates a release and generates those output properties that you can read later if you want to. And it took less than 3 seconds. So this changelog right here, we can have a look at. Looks like this. It's just the hash and the commits as is, nothing fast. All right? So we go into GitHub and do a refresh. And look at that. There's a release. We click on the release, and there's a changelog. Great. And there are no binary assets, nothing more. All right. but we can do a bit better. We can make the change look making it a little bit prettier. So if we look again into JReleaser release and ask for the help, we see all the different options that you can pass in when you have an auto-configure release. For example, if we want the changelog to be formatted, or we want to pass a different changelog, that's something that is written by another tool, and so many other things. All right? So let's use that parameter as before and say, I want to use changelog formatted. So this should make things easier, prettier. But notice that when I do this, it's going to fail. And why it fails, it says, oh, hold on a second. This release already exists, and either you tell me you want to override it, or you tell me that you want to update it, which means you can update the title, the changelog, or the assets. But otherwise, I'm not going to touch it. So there we can set it to override. Then is just say override here. Boom. And now notice that there are more options here in the auto configure, and now it works. And if we look at the changelog that was generated, it starts to look a little bit different. And when we go into GitHub and do a refresh, there we go. Much better. So what about those binaries? Let's add some assets. Yeah, we can continue to add more features. So we go again into release options. You see somewhere here that can pass in files. Just define one flag for the file. Great. So let's do that. That means from here we say file, and we pass in where this thing, target, distributions, and app. And now we say app.zip. And let's pass another one because these are repeatable, and there are two of these that we want to update, distributions and app.tarjc. Okay, so here we go. And notice that this time again, more options here. Now we get checksums being calculated. We got assets updated, and the set of all the checksums. If we look at the contents of those checksums, that will be inside JReleaser checksums. Checksums.txt, that's the file, how it looks like. We go into the release, refresh, and there we got the assets. So far, so good, right? But we don't want to be releasing using a long set of command flags, because what if we have like 20 binaries or some more files? That doesn't scale up. So that's the reason why we have the model file. So now I can show it to you. This one, JReleaser. It has one section that defines metadata about your project, basic information. If you were to use Maven or Gradle, this information can be lifted from the POM file or from the build file, so you don't have to repeat yourself. Because this is using the CLI completely disconnected from Maven, then you have this information, which will be reused for many different places. It can be used for the changelog. It can be used for the package managers. It can be used for the announcers. Then on the release section, we have that, yes, indeed, we're going to publish to GitHub. We're going to overwrite every single release, so I don't have to put it in the command line. I want to sign commits and tags, so I have everything set up already. And I want to post a link to the release into the announcements category of the discussion section of my project. And then there is some configuration. This is very explicit on how I can map those prefixes that I showed you earlier in the commits, so that I can categorize those and eventually remove some of those prefixes. This is the long way to do it. These prefixes match a convention called conventional commits, which if I wanted to make use of everything that is coming in conventional commits, I can remove all these things and add a new setting here called preset equals or colon conventional commits, and boom, I get everything. I want to sign the binaries using my default keys, which again will reside in environmental variables on the JReleaser config toml file that I showed you earlier. I want to create a Homebrew formula using all the defaults. but I can show you what JReleaser will think about your Homebrew formula. So it's only 3 lines, and then we'll see in a moment what actually happens. And then the 2 different binaries, the zip and the tar. Now you notice that I'm not using the actual project version number. I'm using something that looks like a variable placeholder. This is a mustache template. You have seen that in the front end. Now, the version number, of course, has to be given somewhere. I'm going to pass it as an environmental variable. And this allows me to, and there are many different places where I can use these value placeholders to be able to resolve values in a lazy way. Okay, so here we go. Let's do JReleaser config to display the model. And let's see what happens. So this is everything that JReleaser knows about your project based on that YAML file. Let's go to the top. There's that metadata, but notice this information about a snapshot. It can't tell if your project is a snapshot or not because it ends on that particular regular expression, which in this case, obviously it doesn't because it's version 1.0.0. This information about the release, which we just added, that we went to GitHub, but this information was lifted from the Git metadata. Same as which URLs, which formats are going to use to interact with the release. What else? Here's the full information about committing to the changelog. Then checksums, by default, is always this algorithm, and you can add different algorithms. Signing, remember that we only chose active and armor, but we actually have more information. This means there is a secret that has been configured, so it works, and you will never see the contents of the secrets. So that's a good thing. And here we go. Brew, remember that we only said brew and active, but turns out these are more information. So this is the Homebrew repository by default on that particular owner. And I'm going to tag it and a few other things. And here, your distribution that only had the binaries turns out to be a distribution of type Java binary. And the packager that was defined at the global level is actually applied at the local level on the distribution. That's why we see it again here. All right. Okay, so just to be sure that I'm not doing something funky here, I'm going to delete this release. Once again, go back here, no releases. And now,
they still have the tag though. Let's say you still have the tag.
Yeah, I do have a tag. I can delete the tag as well.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure if you wanted to delete that as well.
Here we go. So nothing. And do JReleaser full release. Boom. This uses that configuration. Is no longer in auto configure mode. And notice that it calculates the checksums and now did the signing of all those artifacts. When it uploads to GitHub, they are the signatures that weren't there before, plus the assets. And prepare, package, and publish a Homebrew formula. And try to do the announcements, but I didn't configure any announcers. So that's why it says it's a skip. Okay. So we go here and do a refresh. There should be a release. We click on that release. And look at that changelog. Looks a little bit better, right? I also have the usernames can match here. And they are all the release assets. The binaries, the signatures, and the checksums. Awesome. Notice here there is a John discussion button. So I click on that one and goes into the discussions tab where I get a copy of the release. And now people can react to it and make comments on the release. Great. But we also published a Homebrew formula, didn't we? And that formula was pushed into the Homebrew tab repository, which will be created automatically for you if you don't have it before. So Homebrew JReleaser takes care of this. And I already had it. And here is the formula that was created. Now, the way that it says that I can use this formula, if you look at the README, is so that URL here is the one that belongs to the release that we just pushed. So I can say something like a brew install Almiray tab app, and Homebrew will locate that tab and download the binary. Here we go. I hopefully won't take longer to update Homebrew. Yes, will take a bit longer. I should have done this before. So that's one
okay.
thing about Homebrew, that it will try to keep itself up to date. And if you have very outdated formulas, it will do exactly what it's doing right now, which is downloading the internet like Maven.
Hey, it looks like it's done. All right.
Download failed. Because I tried to download from GitHub.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I probably, from GitLab. So what happened is that I probably have a different tab that is going to GitLab. But here is a nice segue of the things that I can do, because I showed this from GitHub. But you might have seen on my tabs, here's GitLab. Same code. No tags. Okay, so let's make this work. I go into GitLab, here's my project, same sources. I can build it with Maven, just like that. And if I show you the model file, the only difference, there are two differences. I'm now saying I want to release to GitLab, and discussions are a GitHub specific feature, so I take it out. But everything else is the same. So that means I should be able to say JReleaser full release, and this should create a Git release on GitLab, and also create a formula on GitLab. So here we go. Here are all the assets, and it creates a formula. Okay, so what the formula is doing, I can refresh here, and you see that now there will be a tag, and I click on their release. Oh, changelog looks very similar, and there are all the assets. And of course, there happens to be a Homebrew tab that was just updated with a formula that looks very similar to the one that we saw for GitHub, but of course the URL and the shell will be different. Let's see if Homebrew will cooperate right now that we have it on GitLab. What was the command? Brew install Almiray tab app. Let's see if this actually works. Okay, it's downloading again, something. And no, something weird happened. The SHA does not match. We'll have to debug what's going on here and exactly why I tried to pick up GitLab instead of my GitHub tab. Anyway, here's Codeberg. Same project, same sources, no releases. Okay, this is based on GitHub. Here we go, Codeberg. Same project, so we can build it with Maven. And if I show you the model file, there are a few other changes. Again, now say I want to release to Codeberg. There are no discussions because, again, GitHub is specific. But this time, I'm going to announce to a Discord server. I'm going to configure and announce it. The Discord integration uses webhooks, and anyone that has access to the webhook URL can post messages to that channel. So we'll treat that webhook URL as a secret. So trust me, that secret is available in the GitHub configure, in the GitHub, the config toml file. We can check that. Let's say in JReleaser config, and somewhere we hear the announcers. There we go. That's my announcer. And yeah, there's some webhook and some default text. All right. So notice what happens when I say JReleaser full release, like before. Here we go. Checksums, signatures, assets, formula, and a message. So we do here, do a refresh, and there's a release. We click on that one, changelog, and the assets. There should be a Homebrew formula here. which again looks very similar because it's based on templates. And if this template is not good enough, you can provide your own templates if you want to. For example, if we look back into a configuration here, we have a distribution whose name is app. The type of the distribution is Java binary by default. So what we can tell JReleaser is to generate a template for that. So let's say JReleaser help, and you see there is a template command. And we can say JReleaser template and help. And what we need to do is supply the name of the distribution, the type of the distribution, which defaults to Java binary, and the package for which we want to generate the template. So that will be JReleaser template minus the app minus packager brew. And that generates these templates, which we happen to look here. And where is the window is in the other screen. So here we go, like this, and I make it bigger. We go here, and there are the templates that were created for Homebrew. So here's the formula. So this is how the template looks like using mustache templates. And all the different values, so the formula name, the description, the website, the URL, this is the information coming from where? From this section right here. And then the binaries will come from here. The URL and the SHA and a few other things will come from there. Perfect. Well, we made an announcement, right? Here's my Discord chat server, and there's the announcer. And I click on that one, and we'll go back into the release because that's the release notes that we posted. Great. So this is the basic of the tool. And as I show you, you can switch within different services and have the same user experience. And I made all those releases locally from my local environment. But if I want to, I can do it on CI. And of course, if you use this tool, you are bound to make mistakes in the beginning. So one of the things that you can do with JReleaser is run a release or a full release in dry run mode. That means that you can give it a trial of everything that's going to happen. Even though it says I'm creating a release and these assets, nothing really happens. So mutations to any remote services will not occur, but everything will happen locally. So once this is done, you can inspect the output properties or the full log that is generated. So you always have inside JReleaser a file, well, inside the output, a file called tracelog, which contains everything that JReleaser did, including a full evaluation of the whole model, even for those sections that are disabled. So in this way, you can tell if something was not enabled. Now, for example, here's the announcer for Gitter, which is disabled. But we can tell that the announcer for Discord is enabled. And once we pass in everything, we got here all the different elements and everything that JReleaser did in order to create that particular release. So if things look fine for you, then you can go ahead and do the release without the dry run mode. All right. So let's go back to the slides. So what's in the future? What's in store for JReleaser? Well, version 1.0 will come out very, very soon, likely early March. After that version, we may be looking at adding support for or explicit support for other Git services such as Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, or others. An additional packages such as Winget, like Jim mentioned, and App Image that works on Linux, Flatpak also for Linux, and AR is for Arch Linux, if I'm not mistaken, which also requires additional templating mechanisms. And if there were to be other package managers that you would like to see, well, let us know.
Now, did you say that is there a GitHub action that it binds to that's created that can leverage JReleaser?
Yes, I'm going to show that.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I should have shown you the website of the project. Here are some of the URLs. So the project and the whole documentation is hosted at JReleaser.org. The project itself, the code is hosted at JReleaser on the JReleaser GitHub organization. We have an open collective in case that you would like to sponsor the project. And of course, we have a Twitter account because everybody has Twitter nowadays. So about that release action, we can go into GitHub, JReleaser, and then do release action. And you can use this action like that. Just configure Java, build with Maven or Gradle, and then use the release action. Boom, using the default GitHub token if you want to. For other features such as posting to Homebrew, you are going to cross-post to another repository. You cannot use the default GitHub token. You have to use a different token, like a personal GitHub personal access token, which is very easy to create. And there are many things that you can customize here. And JReleaser itself is released using this action. So if we look here into the code of JReleaser, look at the there's the latest release that happened. We follow a different convention for our changelog, but we also have this feature called rolling releases. Every time that we push to main or the master branch, we're going to create a new early access release. This is a snapshot release, and we do this with the same release configuration for the final releases. So in the end, you get a delta of the changelog like this. It's just one commit. And you get all the different binaries that you can just download directly. The action is used here in the workflow when we release JReleaser, such for example, early access. What we do is we build JReleaser, then we invoke assembler because we generate those cross-platform JLink images, the standalone version. And then we just release it using the release action. But that's not the only way that you can do it. If you configure JReleaser as a Maven plugin, for example, this other interesting project called KZCuddle, it's kind of like kubectl, but for Kafka. So you can talk to Kafka using a CLI, and they follow their own conventions with the changelog format. And this uses Quarkus and GraalVM to create native images. And this is built using Maven. And here we go into the POM file and into JReleaser configuration. Here is the Maven configuration for that. So when you invoke this on GitHub Actions, we go to the workflow here, like this one. What they do here is once we figure out which version we want to release, we build with GraalVM using the 3 different nodes, so Linux, Windows, and Mac. That's the only thing that it does. It creates the binaries, all these things, blah, blah, blah. But here's the release. When we grab those versions, we grab all the artifacts, and then just do a release with Maven, passing all the different tokens and secrets using environmental variables. The documentation of the project is here, JReleaser.org. If you click on Get Started, well, surprise, surprise, here's the image that we saw on the slides. There's also explanation of elements in the workflow, how to get started on the command line if you want to, or the different options, information about the different types of distributions that you can access to. So today we saw Java binary, but a few others. All the different integration services that I listed before appear here once again. How you can configure. So this is where you go into the format. So say, for example, I wanted to configure Twitter. So this is what you have to do in the YAML format. But if you don't want to use YAML, then you can go on TOML or JSON or Maven or Gradle, and you can copy that if you want to and adapt it. every single bit of configuration here is listed in the 5 different formats. So it's very easy to follow whichever format you want to use. More information on of each one of those elements, guides for the continuous integration. So once again, Github Actions. Here it tells you what you can do in order to configure that particular action, or you might want to use Jenkins, or is it perhaps GitLab CI, right? So all these things go there. How to use the different plugins that belong to JReleaser, even if you want to use the Docker images, just like that. And oh, we just got a few hits since the last time I took the screenshot. Great. And more importantly, some real life examples. Like JReleaser itself, this is the actual release configuration for JReleaser. There's that basic metadata, and here's the release configuration for GitHub that has its own configuration for the changelog. It's quite verbose in that regard. Signing all the files, announce on Twitter, assemble cross-platform JLink Java runtimes for 8 different targets, and then assemble 4 different distributions: the CLI, the Antasks, the single jar, and the Docker images with the JLink distributions that we saw earlier. So all is there. And so one file generates all these different things and touches all these different Git repositories that are used by the different platform packages to do their job. Just one file and boom, you get a lot of things as and you allow your customers and your users to be able to download and discover your application in a much easier way. Okay. So that's it. So a few things. And so everything that we saw today is open source. So JReleaser itself and the other tools that we're making use of. And if you have not getting involved in open source, let me tell you that it's very, very simple. You find a problem with anything that we saw today or any other open source project that you use in your daily work, file a ticket. That's it. You don't have to do anything more.
Feedback is golden. Feedback is golden. Just
file a ticket. Boom, done. You're in business. If you want to supply a test case or even supply a patch, that's great. That's awesome. But it's plenty of help if you just simply report that something that is not working properly, or if you have an idea for a feature that may be missing. That's plenty of help for us open source developers. If you find anything specific with JReleaser, well, there's the link to our issue tracker, and we are accepting contributions from all around the place. One of the things that we did during Hacktoberfest is we accepted contributions for translation. So the CLI has been translated to 12 different languages already. So that's it. That's everything that I have for you today. I don't know, Jim, if we have a few more questions. We are almost on top of the hour. So
not in the chat. I can go ahead and stop recording though, and we can open the floor up for questions, unless anybody wants to have a question recorded. Other than that, thank you so much, and thank you to our sponsors, Improving, and the prize sponsors as well. We had Intelligent JetBrains donated an Intelligent Ultimate license. We had Structure 101 donate a great tool called one-year license to their Structure 101 IDE plugin. HelloTomorrow.com has donated a one-year license to their Sonograph tool. And Venkat Subramaniam has been generous to donate a one-year subscription to his AgileLearner.com website. And Webucator.com has donated a voucher for their online self-paced course. So again, thank you to our sponsors. And thank you, Andres. I know it's really, really late for you. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really great learning experience. I want to use this for Refactor first, and I look forward to it. So again, thank you so much. And this is a stop the recording, signing off. Happy hacking. Bye.